We're now going to discuss converting your RGB images, which is the color mode that the cameras and scanners are going to use. So most images you're going to get will be RGB. And we're going to discuss converting those over to the CMYK color space, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, or to the grayscale color space. Both of those can be printed on an offset printing press. So if your images are going to a printer where they're going to be doing offset printing, they're going to be creating printing plates, you need to turn your images into either grayscale or CMYK. If you fail to do so and the printer doesn't catch it, your images simply won't print. They'll be blanks. Now, if you're going to print on your own inkjet or your own laser printer, leave the images as RGB. You may be saying to yourself, well, my inkjet printer has a cyan, yellow, magenta, and black cartridge. That has nothing to do with the technical reasons for why an image needs to be converted to CMYK to create printing plates. Your inkjet and your laser printers aren't using printing plates. In fact, most printers prefer that the image stay as RGB. The software for the printer will convert the RGB over to whatever ink cartridges it has. Some of those printers have 8 ink cartridges, not just 4. So let's see what's involved with converting this over to CMYK or grayscale. So let's come down here to the mini bridge and let's open up the 01 Sasha and Lena JPEG. I believe the first one is the GIF. Make sure you get the JPEG version. Let's open that up, make sure it's the JPEG. Yes, it is. Not much to it. You just come over here to the image mode and choose CMYK. Now it comes up here and tells me we're about to convert the CMYK over to the CMYK profile called US Web Coded Swoop version 2. Now back in lesson number 1, we talked about setting up preferences, and I told you to read that little booklet that I wrote. There's also a section in there on color management. Hopefully you've set up your color management. So whatever profile you chose, it's going to list this profile right here. More than likely, this is what it says on your computer as well. We'll go ahead and click OK, and you may see some slight color differences. Remember, there's more colors in the RGB color space than there is the CMYK color space. So any colors in this image that are outside the CMYK color space get converted from RGB down to the closest possible match in the CMY space. Therefore, some colors may change slightly. I'm going to hit Control Z, and you can see that the pink in the sweater here gets a little deeper or darker when we switch it to CMYK. But it's not a big deal. The only thing that really matters is that skin tones stay correct. Nobody knows what color that sweater was. It's going to be looking at that picture. Looks fine. Now, the only catch here is when you go and try to save this image. I'll come over here to File, Save As. And we hit this drop-down menu. You're going to see we don't get quite as many file formats in which we can save a CMYK image. We can't save it as a PNG. We can't even save it as a GIF. Which should come as no surprise since those are web formats, and of course you wouldn't want to change anything over to CMYK unless you're going to print it. But if you ever come up here and wonder why you can't save it as a GIF, that's the reason. Also, there may be some types of adjustments that you can't do. You can't turn it black and white, can't use vibrance. You can't even use it on the adjustment layers. They're all grayed out, so keep that in mind if you're wondering why the vibrance or the black and white adjustment layers aren't available. That's because you switched that over to CMYK. Now I'm going to hit Control Z to go back to RGB. One other thing, be sure to save it as. Do not save over your RGB version. Do a save as, so you should have a CMYK version. You might even call it Sasha and Lena CMYK. That's the image that you're going to use in InDesign or any other program that you use for desktop publishing, assuming that you're going to take your final product to a printing press. Now to switch over to grayscale, it's the same thing. It's going to tell you you're going to lose all color information. Turns into a simple black and white. Not the best of black and whites. In the level 2 course, I show you how to get better black and whites. But this is a black and white format that can actually print on an offset color printing press. It's just going to use a black printing plate. So those are the only 2 types you can use on a printing press. Grayscale, CMYK. Now when you switch it to grayscale, it gets rid of all the colors. So if you decide you want to come in here and put some colored letters or draw on it in color, you can click this and pick all the color you want. But you can see it just converts that over to some form of gray. Dark red will be dark gray, light red will be light gray. You can't put any color on this. If you want to put a caption in color, you'll have to put that text on top of this inside the InDesign program. You'll import the picture, type over the top of an InDesign with color, but you can't put any color here on the image in Photoshop. Again, do a save as to save it out as something different than the original. Once you turn this to grayscale and you save it over your original image, you just lost the color version. You'll never get it back. Let's now take a look at converting layered Photoshop documents into the CMYK color mode. That's all the same process. You just come over to the Image, Mode, CMYK, but you're going to get a message up here that says, changing modes can affect the appearance of layers. Flatten the image before the mode change. You could flatten it and you would basically have a CMYK version without any layers. Cancel just means don't do anything. And you can have don't flatten, which will save the CMYK and keep the layers. Try don't flatten. I have never seen anything happen with the layers when I hit don't flatten. Now, of course, the colors are going to drastically change. See? You thought you were going to get those nice bright blues, but when you come back from the printing press, you've got this. And that's because, of course, that the bright blues were outside of the CMYK color space to begin with. Most of the time when you see these drastic changes, it doesn't come within the image or the photograph itself. It comes to these artificial graphics that you added to the original photograph. If you remember back a long time ago to our lesson on color, when you're going to pick a color that's going to be printed, and you're using that color picker here in Adobe, don't pick a color when you see that yellow warning exclamation point. If you do, you end up with this situation here. The guy who designed this for me obviously didn't know any better. But the layers themselves, nothing happened. Again, there's before, there's after. If you were to come over here and chose don't flatten and something went haywire with the image, undo it, come back around this time and hit flatten. Remember, all that's going to do is save out a flattened version in the CMYK mode. Be sure, again, to do a save as, otherwise you just ruined your PSD with all the layers. Try the grayscale mode. Again, you have an option to flatten. I'll hit don't flatten. Everything looks fine, it's just in black and white. So, use the don't flatten version first. If something goes crazy, undo it and create a flattened version. Just be sure to save out as another file name. So that's all there is to converting your images over to CMYK or over to the grayscale mode. Very simple, you just had a few catches in there. In our next lesson, we're going to talk about converting our images from various RGB color profiles over to the RGB color profile called sRGB, which is the RGB color profile most web browsers are using today to keep colors consistent on the internet. So we'll see you there.